I had worked tirelessly to save up for that car, but the day it arrived, my parents simply decided that my sister deserved it more than me. They gave her my car, just like that. The morning sun streamed through my window, painting a golden rectangle on my bedroom floor. Today was my 25th birthday, and a thrill of anticipation coursed through me. Today was the day I finally got my car, not just any car, a vintage cherry red 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback. I'd fallen in love with it the moment I saw it, a sleek, powerful machine that whispered of freedom and adventure. It was more than just a car, it was a symbol of my independence, my hard work, my escape from this life. I'd spent the last 3 years saving every penny, working extra shifts at the library, tutoring students after school, sacrificing nights out with friends, all for this one goal. I'd meticulously researched the make and model, found a reputable classic car dealer, negotiated the price, and arranged for delivery today, on my birthday. It was going to be perfect. I could hear the sounds of activity downstairs, my mother's shrill laughter, Celeste's, my younger sister, excited squeals. They were probably making breakfast, or rather, my mother was making breakfast while Celeste supervised, offering unhelpful suggestions and demanding attention. The family dynamic was a well-worn script. Celeste, the golden child, the beautiful, charming, effortlessly talented one. And me, Ava, the responsible, practical, overlooked one. I was the stagehand, the supporting character, the one who made sure everything ran smoothly behind the scenes while Celeste basked in the spotlight. I got dressed, pulling on my favorite jeans and a simple t-shirt. I didn't bother with makeup or elaborate hairstyles. It was my day, and I wasn't going to waste it trying to impress anyone. A horn honked outside, a loud, cheerful blast that made my heart leap. It was here. I raced downstairs, my excitement bubbling over. I burst through the front door, expecting to see my beautiful, gleaming Mustang parked in the driveway. Instead, I saw a car. A cherry red 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback, my dream car, but it wasn't mine. Celeste was standing beside it, beaming, her arms outstretched as if embracing the vehicle. My parents were standing beside her, their faces glowing with pride. "Surprise, Celeste!" my mother exclaimed, clapping her hands. "Happy early birthday, darling!" My father handed Celeste a set of keys, a large red bow attached to the keyring. "We know how much you've always wanted a classic car," he said, smiling indulgently. Celeste squealed, throwing her arms around my parents. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's exactly what I wanted." She turned towards the car, stroking the hood with a possessive hand. She shot me a smirk, a triumphant, gloating look that sent a chill down my spine. My parents finally seemed to notice me, standing there, frozen on the porch steps. Their smiles faltered slightly, replaced by expressions of, what? Annoyance? Disinterest? "Oh, Ava," my mother said, her voice lacking any warmth or enthusiasm. "Happy birthday, dear." "Celeste deserves something nice, Ava," my father added, his tone dismissive. "You don't really need a car, do you? You can always take the bus." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. You don't really need a car. The car I had worked for, saved for, dreamed of. The car that was supposed to be mine. I didn't speak. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply stood there, absorbing the scene and the injustice, the blatant favoritism. The shock, the disbelief, the crushing disappointment. It all washed over me, then receded, leaving behind a strange, chilling calm. This wasn't new. This was just the latest, most egregious example of a lifetime of being overlooked, of being second best. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. A switch flipped, a cord snapped. I was done. Done with the sacrifices, done with the expectations, done with trying to earn their love and approval, done with this family. I turned and walked back inside, my steps measured and deliberate. They didn't even notice. They were too busy admiring Celeste's new car, my car, basking in the glow of their perfect daughter's happiness. And I was already gone. The house was still buzzing with Celeste's excited chatter and my parents' fawning praise as I walked back into my room, closing the door softly behind me. The sounds were muffled, distant, as if they belonged to another world, a world I was no longer a part of. I moved with a strange sense of calm, of purpose. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. I knew what I had to do. I grabbed the duffel bag I'd packed that morning, the one I had, for a moment, believed would be filled with excitement and road trip essentials. It was no longer that bag. It was, now, a lifeline to my freedom. I checked the contents one last time. Clothes, toiletries, the small wad of cash I'd withdrawn. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start over. I had a feeling where I was going. I had a purpose. I didn't bother with a note. There was nothing to say. They wouldn't understand. They wouldn't even care. I looked around my room at the faded posters, the overflowing bookshelf, the small, worn out desk where I'd spent countless hours studying, working, saving. It was a room filled with memories, but they were no longer my memories. They belonged to someone else, to the girl I used to be. The memories flooded back, unbidden. The countless times I'd helped Celeste with her homework, while my own assignments went unfinished. The family vacations I'd missed because I had to work. The constant praise and attention lavished on Livia, while my achievements were met with indifference. The feeling of being invisible, of being a shadow in my own home. I pushed the memories away. They no longer had the power to hurt me. I was shedding my old skin, leaving behind the shell of the person I'd been forced to be. I walked out of my room, down the stairs, and out the front door. The sounds of celebration were louder now, a party in full swing. Celeste was undoubtedly showing off her new car, basking in the admiration of her friends. I didn't look back, I didn't hesitate. I simply walked away, my steps firm and purposeful, my gaze fixed on the horizon. The house, the family, the life I'd known, it all receded behind me, shrinking into the distance, becoming smaller and smaller until it was nothing more than a faint memory. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness, yes, but also a sense of relief, of liberation, a sense of excitement. The road ahead was uncertain, unknown, but it was mine. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly, utterly free. And it all started by my determination to never return to the place that robbed me of my future. The first step was practical, a necessary severing of ties. I walked to the nearest bank, my steps echoing on the pavement, each one a deliberate act of separation. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, the atmosphere hushed and impersonal. I approached a teller, my hands surprisingly steady. "I'd like to close my account," I said, my voice calm and even. The teller, a young woman with a bored expression, looked at me without much interest. "Certainly. Do you have your account number and ID?" I handed her my driver's license, the plastic rectangle that represented my former identity, an identity I was now shedding. She typed in the information, her fingers tapping on the keyboard. "And the reason for closing the account?" she asked, her voice monotone. "I'm relocating," I replied, the lie slipping out easily. She processed the transaction, counting out the bills, the meager remains of years of saving, of scrimping, of sacrificing. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to start over, enough to disappear. I repeated the process at another bank, closing a small savings account I'd almost forgotten about. Each closed account, each severed tie felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. My next stop was a small, nondescript electronics store. I walked in, the air thick with the smell of plastic and soldering irons. "Can I help you?" a young man, his face illuminated by the glow of a computer screen, asked. "I need to dispose of this," I said, holding up my phone. He raised an eyebrow but didn't question me. He pointed to a metal bin in the corner. "Just toss it in there, we recycle the components." I didn't just toss it. I took out the SIM card, that tiny chip that held my entire digital life, my contacts, my messages, my history. I snapped it in half, the plastic cracking with a satisfying sound. Then I dropped the pieces into the bin, burying them under a pile of discarded circuit boards and tangled wires. I was untraceable, a ghost. The bus station was crowded and chaotic, a swirl of faces and destinations. I bought a ticket to a city I'd never been to before, a place far enough away to feel like a different world, but close enough to feel manageable. I chose it randomly, a pinprick on the map, a blank slate. As the bus pulled away from the station, I looked out the window, watching the familiar cityscape recede into the distance. My old life, my family, my past, it was all fading away, replaced by the open road, by the uncertainty of the future. The bus was mostly empty. I fell into my thoughts and started to reflect on my choices. Was I wrong to walk out like that? Should I have confronted them, demanded an explanation? But deep inside, I knew I had been right. I remembered the countless times I'd tried to talk to them, to express my feelings, only to be met with indifference, with dismissiveness, with the constant refrain, "Don't be so sensitive, Ava. You're overreacting." No, it was the right call. The miles blurred past, the landscape changing from urban sprawl to rolling hills to open fields. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, the rhythmic hum of the engine lulling me into a state of exhausted calm. I was leaving everything behind: my family, my friends, my education, my career, everything I had worked for, everything I had been. It was terrifying, yes, but it was also exhilarating. I was starting over from scratch, with nothing but the clothes on my back, the cash in my pocket, and the determination to build a life that was truly my own. A life where I was seen, where I was valued, where I mattered. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I drifted off to sleep, the gentle rocking of the bus a comforting lullaby. I was heading towards an unknown future, a blank canvas waiting to be filled. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense of anticipation. I was free, and I was ready. The city was a beast, a sprawling concrete jungle, teeming with millions of people, each with their own dreams, their own struggles, their own stories. It was overwhelming, intimidating, and utterly exhilarating. It was exactly what I needed: anonymity, a fresh start. I found a small, cheap apartment in a nondescript neighborhood, far from the glittering skyscrapers and the trendy boutiques. It was a single room, sparsely furnished, with a view of a brick wall. But it was clean, it was safe, and it was mine. I needed a job. I wasn't picky. I needed to survive, to pay rent, to eat. But I also knew I wanted something, connected to my past, to the one thing I had truly loved. I found it in a small, independent car dealership on the outskirts of the city. Ace Motors, the sign read, the paint faded and peeling. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I walked in, the scent of motor oil and leather filling my nostrils. A young man, dressed in a greasy mechanic's uniform, looked up from under the hood of a car. "Can I help you?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "I'm looking for a job," I said, my voice steady and confident. "I saw your ad online." I was hired as a receptionist, answering phones, scheduling appointments, filing paperwork. It was a far cry from my previous aspirations, from the career I'd envisioned for myself. But it was a foot in the door, and it was in the automotive world, a world I understood, a world I loved. I threw myself into the work, determined to learn everything I could. I studied the inventory, memorized the specs of each car, listened to the sales pitches, observed the mechanics in the garage. I asked questions, I took notes, I absorbed information like a sponge. The dealership was a microcosm of the city itself, a diverse mix of people, each with their own story, their own hustle. There were the smooth-talking salesmen, the gruff but skilled mechanics, the stressed-out manager, and the other office staff, each navigating their own way through the daily grind. I observed them all, learning their rhythms, their motivations, their strengths and weaknesses. I learned how to read people, how to anticipate their needs, how to negotiate, how to close a deal. I was starting from scratch, yes, but I was also learning, growing, evolving. I was no longer the quiet, overlooked daughter, the responsible, dependable one. I was becoming someone new, someone stronger, more confident, more in control. One afternoon, I was organizing the inventory files when I overheard a conversation between the manager and one of the mechanics, a man named Mike. They were discussing a problem with a vintage car, a classic Mustang, similar to the one that had been stolen from me. "I'm telling you, Mike," the manager said, his voice frustrated. "I can't find anyone who knows how to fix this thing. It's a classic. It needs specialized knowledge." Mike sighed. "I've tried everything I can think of, boss. It's something with the carburetor, I'm sure of it, but I can't pinpoint the problem." I hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "Excuse me," I said, stepping forward. "I might be able to help." They both looked at me, surprised. The manager raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "You, Missy? You know about classic cars?" Yes, I said, my voice firm. I do. I explained my fabricated experience, my self taught knowledge of vintage Mustangs. I spoke with confidence, with passion, with a depth of understanding that surprised even myself. Mike, to his credit, didn't dismiss me. He looked at me, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. All right, he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Let's see what you've got. And that was the beginning of my new life, my new career, my new identity. I was still a ghost in a way, but I was starting to materialize, to take shape, to become someone real. Someone who this time wouldn't be overlooked. The grease-stained floor of the Ace Motors garage became my classroom, the roar of engines my soundtrack, and the smell of gasoline my perfume. I started as a receptionist, answering phones and filing paperwork, but I was a sponge, absorbing everything I could about the automotive world. It turned out my hobby of obsessing over cars, specifically that car, had given me a surprisingly solid foundation. I quickly proved myself to be more than just a competent receptionist. I had a knack for sales, an intuitive understanding of what customers wanted, even before they knew it themselves. I could talk specs, performance, and history with a passion that surprised even me. I wasn't just selling cars, I was selling dreams, aspirations, a lifestyle. Within a few months, I was promoted to sales associate, then to sales manager. My commissions soared. I was good at this, really good. It wasn't just about the cars, it was about people, about understanding their desires, their insecurities, their unspoken needs. It was about building relationships, earning trust, and closing deals. I started taking on more responsibilities, immersing myself in the financial side of the business, learning about inventory management, marketing strategies, and the intricate dance of supply and demand. I devoured books on business, finance, and negotiation, spending my evenings studying, learning, growing. I also started networking, attending industry events, making connections with influential people. I learned to navigate the world of high-powered executives, wealthy investors, and demanding clients. I learned to speak their language, to play their game, to earn their respect. It wasn't easy. I faced sexism, skepticism, and outright hostility. I was a young woman in a male-dominated industry, and I had to fight for every inch of ground I gained. But I was determined. I was driven. And I had something to prove. Not to my family, not to anyone else, but to myself. I was meticulous with my finances, saving every penny I could. I lived frugally, avoiding unnecessary expenses. My focus laser sharp on my long-term goal. I was building a foundation, a launching pad for something bigger, something mine. One evening, after a particularly successful sales day, a group of my coworkers invited me out for drinks. They were a good bunch mostly, and I appreciated the camaraderie. But I politely declined. Come on, Ava, Mark, the mechanic who'd first recognized my potential, said. You've been working like a dog. You deserve a break. I appreciate it, I replied, smiling. But I have other plans. My plans didn't involve socializing. They involved spreadsheets, market research, and business plans. They involved building my future, a future where I was in control, where I called the shots, where I answered to no one but myself. My confidence was growing, day by day, fueled by my successes and by the knowledge that I was capable of far more than anyone, including myself, had ever believed. I was proving it, not with words, but with actions. The leap was terrifying. Leaving the security of a steady paycheck, the comfort of a familiar routine, to venture out on my own, to risk everything I'd worked for, it was the biggest gamble of my life. But I knew, deep down, that it was the right move. I couldn't stay at Ace Motors forever. I needed to build something mine. I named my company Phoenix Motors. It was a symbol of my own transformation, my rise from the ashes of my past. It was also a bold, ambitious statement of intent. I wasn't just selling cars, I was creating something new, something unique, something that would soar. The beginning was rough. I found a small, rundown garage in a less than desirable part of town. The rent was cheap, but the space needed a lot of work. I spent weeks cleaning, painting, and renovating, turning the grimy, neglected space into a showroom and workshop that reflected my vision. Money was tight. I poured every penny I'd saved into the business, living on ramen noodles and sheer determination. I faced countless setbacks. Suppliers who didn't take me seriously, customers who were skeptical of a young woman running a luxury car dealership, equipment that broke down at the worst possible moment. I worked tirelessly, often 18-hour days, 7 days a week. I was the CEO, the salesperson, the mechanic, the janitor, and everything in between. I learned to do everything myself, from changing oil to negotiating complex financing deals. My focus was on a niche market, high-end, customized vehicles for wealthy clients. I had a unique eye for design, a talent for understanding what my customers wanted, even before they knew it themselves. I wasn't just selling cars, I was selling works of art, expressions of individuality, statements of power and prestige. Slowly, painstakingly, word of mouth spread. My reputation grew. Phoenix Motors became known for its exceptional quality, its innovative designs, its unparalleled customer service. I started attracting clients from all over the country, then from all over the world. Months turned into a year. I still hadn't had one day off. The challenges were constant. The pressure was immense, but I thrived on it. I was building something real, something tangible, something that was entirely mine. I was proving to myself and to the world that I was capable of far more than anyone had ever given me credit for. I was no longer the overlooked, undervalued daughter. I was a force to be reckoned with. I was the phoenix rising from the ashes, stronger and more powerful than ever before. And I was just getting started. The city that once felt overwhelming now felt like my domain. My office, a sleek modern space on the top floor of a downtown skyscraper, overlooked the glittering panorama, a constant reminder of how far I'd come. Phoenix Motors was no longer a fledgling startup. It was a multi-million-dollar enterprise, a name synonymous with luxury, innovation, and impeccable taste. Years had passed, years of relentless work, unwavering dedication, and a fierce determination to prove myself. I had built an empire, brick by brick, car by car. My name, Ava Lancaster, or rather Ava, as I was now known professionally, was on everyone's lips. I was featured in glossy magazines, hailed as a visionary entrepreneur, a disruptor in the automotive industry. I was interviewed on television, my story resonating with aspiring business owners and anyone who had ever felt underestimated, overlooked. I was invited to speak at conferences, sharing my insights, my strategies, my passion. I was surrounded by the trappings of success: a luxurious penthouse apartment, a wardrobe filled with designer clothes, a social calendar packed with exclusive events. But none of it mattered as much as the work itself. The thrill of designing a custom vehicle, of seeing my vision come to life, of exceeding my clients' expectations, that was the real reward. I had a team of talented, dedicated employees who shared my vision, who worked tirelessly alongside me. We were more than just a company. We were a family, bound together by a shared passion for excellence. I remained grounded despite the whirlwind of success. I never forgot where I came from, the struggles I had overcome, the sacrifices I had made. I used my platform to support young entrepreneurs, especially women, providing mentorship and funding to help guide them achieve their dreams. I looked in the mirror, seeing not the timid, overlooked girl I once was, but a confident, powerful woman staring back. The transformation was complete. I had achieved everything I set out to do, and more. I had built an empire. I had proven my worth. Not to my family, not to anyone else, but to myself. But even with all this success, there was still a part of me I couldn't quite reach, a lingering echo of the past. The intercom buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. "Ms. Lancaster," my assistant's voice said, "you have a package. It's marked personal." Intrigued, I told her to bring it in. She placed a small, cream-colored envelope on my desk. It was handwritten, addressed to me in a familiar, looping script. My mother's. I stared at the envelope, a complex mix of emotions swirling within me. Curiosity, apprehension, and a faint, lingering flicker of something I couldn't quite name. I tore it open. Inside was a formal invitation, embossed with the Lancaster family crest, requesting my presence at a family gathering. "A celebration of family," it read. The hypocrisy was almost comical. The invitation felt heavy in my hand. a tangible link to a past I had tried so hard to leave behind. The cream-colored cardstock, the embossed family crest, the carefully worded phrases. It was all a facade, a desperate attempt to paper over the cracks in their crumbling world. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to toss the invitation in the trash, to ignore it completely, to continue living my life, my new life, without any contact with the people who had so carelessly discarded me. But another part of me, a curious, perhaps slightly vindictive part, wanted to see their faces, to witness their reaction, to see how far they had fallen and how high I had risen. Flashbacks flickered through my mind, sharp and painful. My 18th birthday, completely forgotten amidst Livia's dance recital preparations. The countless times I'd been asked to run errands for them, to take care of their responsibilities while they showered attention on Celeste. The sting of their dismissive words, their casual cruelty, their constant underestimation of my worth. My father once telling me that education wasn't that important for girls. I knew why they were inviting me now. It wasn't out of love or regret or a genuine desire to reconnect. It was out of desperation. I'd heard the rumors, whispers circulating in the business world. My father's company was on the brink of collapse. My brother's reputation was in tatters. Livia's social standing had plummeted. They were struggling, and they needed help. My help. The family that had never valued me, that had treated me like an afterthought, was now turning to me, the forgotten daughter, as their last resort. A small, cynical smile played on my lips. The irony was almost too perfect. I decided to accept the invitation, not out of obligation or forgiveness or any lingering sense of familial duty, but out of a desire for closure, for one final, definitive act of severance. I would go back, not as the timid, overlooked girl they remembered, but as the woman I had become. A woman of power, of success, of independence. A woman they could no longer touch. I picked up the phone and called my assistant. "Clear my schedule for next Saturday," I said, my voice calm and firm. "And arrange for a car. Actually, arrange for several cars, the best we have. I'm going home." I hung up the phone, a sense of anticipation, of quiet triumph filling me. It was time to show them what they had lost. It was time to show them who I had become. It wasn't about revenge. It was about finally, definitively closing the door on my past and driving away in a fleet of cars they could only dream of affording. The drive back to my childhood home was surreal. Instead of the familiar anxiety and quiet dread I used to feel approaching that house, I felt nothing. A calm, detached curiosity. I was a visitor in my own past, an observer of a life that no longer belonged to me. But I wasn't arriving as a visitor. I was arriving as a statement. I had instructed my team to prepare a selection of vehicles from Phoenix Motors' exclusive collection. Not just one car, but a convoy. A rolling exhibition of my success, my power, my complete and utter transformation. Leading the way was my custom-designed flagship model, the Phoenix Ascendant. A sleek, powerful machine that embodied my journey. It was a one-of-a-kind, a masterpiece of engineering and design, and it was mine. As we approached the Lancaster estate, the familiar wrought iron gates came into view. The house, a sprawling, ostentatious mansion that had always felt more like a museum than a home, stood at the end of the long, winding driveway, and I saw them waiting on the front steps. My family. My mother, her face carefully made up, her smile strained. My father, his posture rigid, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. Celeste, her usual flamboyant style subdued, her eyes wide with disbelief, and Mark looking completely and utterly lost. The convoy rolled to a stop, the engines purring like a chorus of powerful beasts. The sheer spectacle of it, the undeniable display of wealth and success, was intentional. It was a visual representation of the chasm that now separated me from my family. I stepped out of the Phoenix Ascendant, the sunlight glinting off the polished chrome and the deep, iridescent paint. I was dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that exuded power and confidence. I was no longer the invisible, overlooked daughter. I was a woman in command. My family stood frozen, their faces a mixture of shock, awe, and shame. Celeste's jaw literally dropped. My parents looked smaller somehow, defeated. Ava, dear, my mother began, her voice gushing, overly sweet. You look wonderful. We always knew you had potential. We're so proud of you. The words were hollow, forced, a pathetic attempt to bridge the unbridgeable gap. My father stepped forward, extending a hand, his smile strained. Ava, it's good to see you. I ignored his outstretched hand, my gaze sweeping over them, taking in their carefully constructed facades, their desperate attempts to appear welcoming, loving, proud. Celeste, recovering slightly from her initial shock, tried to regain her composure, a flicker of her old arrogance returning. Wow, Ava, you've changed, she said, her voice laced with a mixture of envy and resentment. I have, I replied, my voice calm, composed, utterly devoid of any emotion. They ushered me inside, their movements awkward, their conversation stilted. The house, once a symbol of their affluence and my exclusion, felt smaller somehow, less impressive. They led me to the living room, the same room where I had spent countless birthdays unnoticed, where I had witnessed Celeste's endless parade of gifts and adoration. The room was filled with forced pleasantries, with awkward attempts at small talk, with a palpable undercurrent of desperation. We've missed you so much, Ava, my mother said, her voice trembling slightly. We've been so worried. The house hasn't been the same without you, my father added, his gaze avoiding mine. They went on, showering me with compliments, with praise, with false affection. They talked about how proud they were, how they had always believed in me, how they had always known I would be successful. Then, the real reason for their invitation emerged. It started subtly with hints about the challenging economic times, about the difficulties the family business was facing. Then, it became more blatant, more desperate. Your father's company, it's not doing well, Ava, my mother said, her voice pleading. We're in trouble. We were hoping, my father began, then hesitated, unable to meet my gaze. We were hoping you might be able to help us out. And then Celeste. Ava, remember when you said I could keep the Mustang? Well, silly me, I had a little accident. Could you know, maybe get me a new one? You can afford it. I listened to them, my expression unchanging. I let their words wash over me, their pleas, their excuses, their thinly veiled requests for financial assistance. I observed their desperation with a cool, almost clinical detachment. These people, my family who'd never seen me, never valued me, were now begging for my help. The irony was exquisite, but it brought me no satisfaction, only a profound sense of emptiness. I had come seeking closure, and I was finding it not in their remorse, but in my own indifference. I let them talk. I let the apologies, the pleas, the justifications, the thinly veiled requests for help wash over me like a tepid wave. I didn't interrupt, didn't argue, didn't even react. I simply observed them, my family, these strangers who shared my blood but had never truly known me. My mother recounted all the times she'd supposedly been there for, twisting past events. My mother rambled on about how proud they were, how they'd always known I was destined for great things. My father chimed in, talking about the importance of family, about sticking together through thick and thin. Celeste, surprisingly subdued, mumbled something about being sorry, about how she didn't realize at the time. Even Mark was here, called by my parents. It was a performance, a carefully orchestrated attempt at reconciliation, driven not by genuine remorse, but by desperation. They needed me. Not the me I was then, but the me I had been. The reliable, dependable, invisible Ava, who quietly fixed their problems and asked for nothing in return. Now, when they finally ran out of steam, when the silence stretched, heavy and expectant, I took a slow, deliberate breath. I looked at each of them, my gaze unwavering, my expression unreadable. You gave away what was mine, I said, my voice calm, measured, utterly devoid of any emotion. It wasn't just a car, it was my independence, my future, my dream. You gave it away without a second thought to someone who didn't earn it, who didn't appreciate it, who didn't deserve it. I paused, letting my words sink in. Now, I continued, my voice still even, I have more than you will ever own. Not just material possessions, but something far more valuable: self respect, independence, freedom. I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. The finality of the movement, small as it might be, was clear. So, I came here today and not for you. I needed to close a chapter in my life, I said, and now it's closed. I turned and walked toward the door, my footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Ava, please, my mother cried out, her voice cracking with desperation. Don't go, we need you. Please reconsider. Family is forever, my father said. Ava, I am sorry, Celeste screamed. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Their words, their pleas, their belated expressions of regret, they were meaningless. They were echoes of a past I had left behind. I reached the door, my hand on the knob. Ava, please, Mark said. I opened the door, stepped out into the sunlight, and walked towards my waiting car, the flagship of my fleet. My drivers, sensing the end of the meeting, started their engines, a low rumble of power that filled the air. I got into the back seat of the Phoenix Ascendant, the leather cool and smooth beneath my touch. I gave the signal, a subtle nod of my head, and we began to move, the convoy of luxury vehicles gliding smoothly down the driveway, away from the Lancaster estate, away from my family, away from my past. I looked out the window, watching them standing there, on the steps of the house that had never felt like a home, their faces reflecting the full weight of their loss, their regret, their utter defeat. They were shrinking figures in the distance, becoming smaller and smaller, until they were nothing more than a blur, a fading memory. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, no vindictive glee, only a profound sense of closure, of finality. I had come, I had seen, I had spoken my truth, and now I was leaving, for good. The past was behind me, the pain, the neglect, the betrayal. It was all there, a part of my story, but it no longer defined me. I had risen above it, transformed it, used it as fuel to build a life beyond anything they could have imagined. I had proven my worth not to them, but to myself. I had found my freedom, my independence, my power, and I was never going to let anyone take that away from me again. As we drove away, the city skyline appearing on the horizon, a symbol of my future, of my limitless possibilities, I leaned back in my seat, a faint smile playing on my lips. I was free. And the open road stretched before me, beckoning me towards a future I had created, a future that was entirely gloriously my own.